So we've just covered the if formula, and we're now going to look at effectively the second part, which is VLOOKUP. So what is VLOOKUP? Well, it's a way of searching a table for information based on a reference value, and then asking it to return content from a specific column which you've nominated. We can use this to search a reference table. It could be a list of clients in a database, or we can use it to auto-populate a form based on a reference. The key aspect here is there needs to be a unique reference identifier, and the column containing that identifier needs to be the first column. Again, that might sound a bit complicated, but when you start to look at the example, you'll see it begins to make a bit more sense. So what does it look like? Again, you have an equal sign to start it, and the first part is VLOOKUP. And then the first part of the bit in brackets, the first of the criteria, is something called the lookup value. So what we're saying there is, what is it that you want me to look for in this table, in column 1 of this table? The second section in green here, A1 to N500, is sometimes referred to as the table array, or the data basically. So these are the cells that you're telling the computer to look at to search for the value that's in P1. Now the second one after that, after the second comma there, the 5, that's the column number. So you have to specify which column in that table. So in that table A to N, you need to say, okay, which column do you want me to look at? In this case, it will be column E, because that's the 5th column in the table. And then the last part is very important. If you have a 0 in there, it means that you want an exact match. In other words, you don't want something that's approximately close to what you've specified in P1. You want it to be exactly the same. You can have an approximate value, and if you want to do that, you would put a 1 in there. But again, you're likely to end up encountering an error if you do that. There are ways around that, but it's much better and easier to simply specify 0. If you forget to put something in there, so if you don't add anything, a 0 or a 1, then it will be an approximate value, and again that can cause errors. So you just need to be very careful to be specific in that case. So just to cover off on the next few bullets, equals VLOOKUP tells the program what function you're using. It's enclosed in brackets as with other functions. P1, as I said, is the lookup value. The table array is the green, and then just cover it off on those. 5 is the column number, and 0 indicates an exact match. This will make sense when we go through the examples. As with most functions, you can substitute elements for references to other cells. In this case, the lookup value has to be a reference to a cell. It can't be a range. The table array is, in this case, it's a relative reference. So we covered off earlier about the dollar signs. So here you can see that if you copy this VLOOKUP formula as it is, that range will change. So it might change to A2, for example, as you copy across. It depends how you do that. So you just have to be careful with that one. The column number can also be replaced with a reference. So you don't have to have the number in there. You could refer to a function, or you could refer to a cell where you have a column number specified, but it has to be a number. If the column number exceeds the number of columns available, it will come back with an error. And then the last part, as I covered off before, has to be a 1 or a 0. You can't change it to something else. So it can't be a formula or a function. I suppose you could refer to another cell with 1 or 0 in it, but generally that has to be the same. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to switch back to the sheet to do an example. And we're going to go to sheet 1. You'll see there's other bits from the previous session in here. But what I'm going to do is go to cell A6, and then I'm going to type in order number. What I'm actually going to do is build effectively a small form that you can use to self-populate, but this will become clear. In cells A7 to A9, I'm just going to type in some criteria. So I'm going to type quantity and date and order value. And then in cell B6, I'm just going to type in a reference. So I'm going to type in Lee 77721. Now, the only reason I'm doing this at this stage is when I type the formula in, it will show an error because there is nothing in that box otherwise. So I know this is a reference that exists in the table that I'm going to use. So therefore, I'm just typing it in to save it being an error. You'll see why in a second when I demonstrate later on. In cell B7, I want to start writing the formula. So again, you start with an equal sign and you start to type VLOOKUP. It'll give you options, as you can see there. And I'm just going to click on that. You can double click on this and it'll type out the opening part, or you can type it. Now, I want to refer to cell B6. Now, if I navigate, so you see it's got a breakdown here of the different component parts. So if I just click on the cell, it'll highlight it. Now, I want it to be an absolute reference. I don't want it to change. So if I type F4 or put $signs in, then it fixes it to that cell. So at this stage, you need to add in the range, so the table array. So if I click on there and I navigate to sample data, and what I want to do is I want to select F1 through to, let's just select it to N. And then what I want to do is I want to go down to 5,600. So rather than scroll down, I'm just going to go up to the box here and type in 6,000. And again, I want to make these absolute. So if I just I'm just inserting the $sign, so you can use F4, but I'm just doing it a little bit differently just for demonstration purposes. And then what you want to do is you want to specify the column. Now, in the first case, quantity is the first one, so you see it's column G. Now, in this case, because we're only looking at column F through to N, column F is column 1, column G is 2, so I need to specify 2, and then I need to add that last bit of the formula as mentioned before. So if I put a comma, it now says, okay, you just want me to get an approximate, which is no, we don't. We want it to be false, so we want it to be an exact match, which has to be 0 in this case. Now, if you double click on the relevant thing, it will type in the word false, but it has the same effect if you add 0 in there. And then if you close the brackets, that's the complete formula. We'll just cover off on this again when I press return. So you can see now it's returned a value. So it's looking up this figure here. Now, just to demonstrate what would happen and why I put that in earlier, if I take out L and say replace it with M, it shows a horrible error because it doesn't exist. So that was just really to save on that view. So the next stage is to do a similar thing with the date and the order value. Now, what you can do is if I drag this down, it will copy the same thing. Why? Because the column number hasn't changed. So if I now go back to the table and just check to see, well, where is the date? Well, the date happens to be the next column across, so that's fine. So if I go there and if I go into the formula by highlighting on the cell, clicking up here, and then clicking 3, and then return. So it's given the date in a numeric formula. So if I go up to home and then do the drop down here, the bottom right, click on date. Now I normally like to have a US version of the date, but it's entirely up to you what you choose to do. Click OK, and then it'll have that date there. Now, if I then go here and check just for a moment what the last one is, it's order value, so it's that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's column 5. So if I click on that and then change that to 5. And then again, we need to make sure this is currency, so you can click on a quick symbol here, or you can use the drop down and you can specify the currency symbols, etc. And there you go. Now, just to quickly check, we know it's the first one here because that's the one I chose. We know it's 44,460 and 1482 and 5th of May. So it's pulled the information from there. Now, as demonstrated before, if I type in M, in this case, it'll return nothing because it doesn't exist. Undo. On the other hand, if I just select, let's just select that one and copy it. You can type in any order number as long as you know what it is, and then it will return the value that's in there. So that's a very quick method of producing a form and using a VLOOKUP formula to do that. So let's just have a look at the content. So here's the formula at the top. VLOOKUP telling you what to do. The lookup value, which is staying the same all the time, so we're always looking at this box here. The sample data, we always want to look at this particular range. Again, you would have to be wary if your rows increased or your columns changed orders or things like that, then you wouldn't get the correct thing you're expecting to see. And then column 2, again, the assumption here is that quantity is in column 2 of that range. Obviously, if the quantity disappears, as in the column is missing, or the column moves to another order, column 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, then you need to be wary that that will obviously show a false reading. And here we've got false, so if I just click on here and take this out for a second just to demonstrate, and if I click approximate, you'll see the things should change. Oh, in this case it doesn't change. Interesting. Let me just undo that. When you have true in there or an approximate value, this table here has to be, this column has to be in order. Otherwise it'll come back with a false reading. So that's just something to be aware of. Let me just review my notes. That was fairly quick, that one. So we have a little table used to search the data on order number. The data has been populated because that reference before is a valid reference. If we have something that doesn't exist, then it will just generate an error as demonstrated before. So if I just do that again quickly, that doesn't exist in the table, and that's how you know it doesn't exist. So what you can do is quite useful, is if you go into the formula bar here and use something called IFERROR. So that's another function. You'll see it comes up. If I open a bracket and then I just have to add a bracket on the end, sorry, I have to add another part there. So what you're really doing is saying if there's an error generated from this formula, what do you want to show? And just say, type some text in here. Let's get it right. Let me just explain that. So what we've done is we've enclosed, called nesting, this VLOOKUP formula function within an IFERROR, and all IFERROR is doing is saying if this is a problem, if it doesn't work out, if there's something horrible that doesn't add up or whatever, or in this case an order number that doesn't exist, what I want you to do, I want you to say not available. I just want you to put some text in that box. So if I click, I've just went undo now. Let me do that quickly again. If comma not available, close brackets, then it will generate that. So it just looks a bit more pleasing to the eye when you do that. And if you you would have to write them out separately because obviously all the column numbers are different. So I'm just going to quickly do that now. It's useful for a number of different things because you can make your spreadsheet just look a bit more pleasing, or you can generate, for example, you might put the word error in there so it tells you there's a problem, or you could put a figure in there which you can then use to sort, or you can use to categorize, or you can use in a pivot table. There's a number of different things you can do with that. Let me just do this last one. Okay, so that's doing all of that, and now if I go back and do Lee 77721, there you go, gets rid of it. So that was just a little bit extra. You can obviously add more details to this, so you could pick a number of different columns. You might have a table which has 100 columns in, and you only want 10, you can tailor this so it only looks up those 10 key columns that you need to say, okay, I need to see whether there's an order in the system for this or recorded for this. Then we can do that. Now obviously there's a lot of stock management systems and things like that where these are designed for that purpose, but if you do an extract from that system, then you can set this up so you can search it. You might have an automatic connection to a database which pulls the information from the database depending upon the query you've set up, and then you might want to look at that separately. So you might do a monthly extract and then you want to look at it. There's a lot of different things you can use. It just depends on how versatile you want to be. Just let me check my notes. That's all for VLOOKUP. So it's basically a method of looking up information, and that was a very quick and easy demonstration. We're now going to move on to the next section, so I'll just stop and create another break in the tape.